Hello, this is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and artificial doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today I'm doing a solo cast, and I'm doing something a little bit different. Well, I've done it before, technically, but I'm doing a whole episode of it, where I take a random page. No, actually, what I'm doing is ask my intuition or my higher self or whatever to pick a random book in my bookshelf and a random page, and I read for as long as it feels right, and then I'll pick something else and do it again. So I'll see how it goes, see how people watch and stuff. So all right, let's get to it. Okay, so I've got a book here. It's this. It's well, I'm not sure if I'm actually going to show a video of this on YouTube or anything at some point or not. So when I said this, it's like I'm showing it on the screen. They could just tap it on the podcast. So this is the Hermetica, Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs by Timothy Freke, Freke, and Peter Gandy. Tarcher Cornerstone editions. And so just to be sure, I can put more information in, but no, I think I've got enough information. Otherwise, I bore people with information about every single book, right? All right, so the page was on is page 5. So this section is actually part from the prophecies of Hermes, it says here. Egypt is an image of the heavens, and the whole cosmos indeed. And the whole cosmos, what? How is that happening? And the whole cosmos dwells here in its sanctuary. But the gods will desert the earth and return to heaven, abandoning this land that was once the home of spirituality. Egypt will be forsaken and desolate, bereft of the presence of the gods. It will be overrun by foreigners who will neglect our sacred ways. This holy land of temples and shrines will be filled with corpses and funerals. The sacred Nile will be swollen with blood, and her waters will rise, utterly fouled with gore. Does this make you weep? There is worse to follow. This land that was a spiritual teacher to all my humankind, which loved the gods with such devotion that they deigned to sojourn here on earth, this land will exceed all others in cruelty. The dead will far outnumber the living, and the survivors will be known as Egyptians. By their language alone, for in their actions, they will be like men of another race. O Egypt, nothing will remain of your religion, but an empty tale, which even your own children will not believe. Nothing will be left to tell of your wisdom, but old graven stones. Men will be weary of life and cease seeing the universe as worthy of reverent wonder. Spirituality, the greatest of all blessings, will be threatened with extinction and believed a burden to be scorned. The world will no longer be loved as an incomparable work of atom, a glorious monument to his primal goodness, an instrument of the divine will. to evoke veneration and praise in the beholder. Egypt will be widowed. Every sacred voice will be silenced. Darkness will be preferred to light. No eyes will raise to heaven. The pure will be thought insane, and the impure will be honored as wise. The madman will be believed brave, and the wicked esteemed as good. Knowledge of the immortal soul will be laughed at and denied. No reverent words worthy of heaven will be heard or believed. So I, thrice-great Hermes, the first of men to attain all knowledge, have inscribed the secrets of the gods in sacred symbols and holy hieroglyphs on these stone tablets, which I have unsealed for a future world that may seek our sacred wisdom. Through all-seeing mind, I myself have been the witness of the invisible things of heaven, and through contemplation come to know of the truth. This knowing I've set down in these writings. Well, I think that's pretty powerful. Because for one, you don't just have to apply that to Egypt. I mean, it starts with Egypt. I mean, it really was a spiritual place, for sure, at one point. I mean, at the time of Akhenaten, they actually effectively worshipped the Lord One. Or at least, well, it depends on how many people he converted, right? Or at least, I don't know if he actually was the Lord One, but it certainly had more in common with it. It's just that the priests didn't accept that afterwards, after he died. So his face got defaced in statues and stuff. So, I mean, that's where they had a form of education. What's it called? It's got like these three different, I've gone blank right now. But it's where Hermeticism originates from, potentially, unless you say Hermeticism goes back to Atlantis or earlier, which potentially it does, because it's knowledge that ultimately you could say comes from the heavens, in inverted commas. Exo knowledge. Wait, what do I call that? I'm not sure. So yeah, so the whole cosmos dwells here. So it's a very, so yeah, I mean, Thoth founded Egypt there in Kem. This is Egypt. So it was once a very spiritual place, but what happened is things changed. The kingdom of Egypt ceased to be in the form that it was, ancient Egypt. I mean, first when the trouble really started for it when the Sea Peoples attacked, and during the Bronze Age collapse, Egypt survived, but it struggled, right? I mean, perhaps Egypt's golden age was actually before recorded history, because the first we hear of Egypt, or at least some of its early history, seems to have been where it wasn't really united. It had like 3 different kingdoms or something, and then it united, but I suspect it was united prior to that. Yeah, but I'm backtracking a bit. But in any case, the Assyrians invaded, but after their empire fell, it ended up being the Alchemid, that's a terrible pronunciation, the Alchemid Persian Empire, the one that Alexander the Great conquered, that conquered Egypt. So that said, Hermes, I think this is Hermes Trismegistus that is being referred to here. The province of Hermes was in Ptolemaic Egypt, not Ptolemaic, Ptolemaic Egypt, and is apparently a reincarnation of Thoth. So I don't know if that's true. We don't need to know, right? So, but it's interesting because it says things about what happened to our society, especially Western society, where, so, I mean, it's talking about the narrowing on blood overrun by foreigners. But after that, that's what's really interesting to me, because it's not just Egypt, but okay, so the Egyptian religion, nothing remained of the religion. No one really believes in it anymore. Maybe some people believe in it, but some not very common. But yeah, the next page, page 7, is quite interesting. It's every sacred voice will be silenced, darkness will be preferred to light, no eyes will raise to the heaven, the pure will be thought insane, and the impure will be honored as wise. Now, so with the prevalence of mainstream science and what you could say scientism, and certainly materialism and physicalism is very prominent in science, where anything spiritual isn't really taken seriously, despite quantum physics having been around for quite a while and having serious mystical implications. I mean, interestingly, one of the things I disliked about it was precisely how relativist it was, because I wasn't really accepting as part of the truth that I wasn't really willing to accept, which is probably why I disliked it so much, because yeah, it's funny, like the Copenhagen interpretation, like, you know, it might be tempting to rail against it if you identify with physicalism, but maybe not, because you get postmodernists who, interestingly, do actually are kind of in their own way going in a mystical direction. So I wonder how many postmodernists might eventually become spiritual through that sort of angle. So, yeah. I mean, often there's a sort of material nihilism which is prevalent, and that you could say fits into the darkness preferred to light, and the sacred voice will be silenced. So the media portrays the spirituality as just ridiculous bunk that only someone who is stupid or ignorant or insane would buy into. And mysticism, wow, that's just that's like to the mainstream. Mysticism is like cuckoo to them, right? It's like only schizophrenics believe in that, right? And we've got to a point when actual people who are actually essentially shamans are diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, I understand some people might object to the idea of, no, there's a potential danger, or at least some people might point to the idea of like, okay, you're basically saying a dangerous mental disorder is like powers, right? People having powers, and you're dangerous even talking about that, right? The way I feel is that it's an issue when someone has that predisposition and is in a low frequency state or in a low mental health state where they're anxious or paranoid or something like that, then they might be experiencing negative voices and essentially experiences that are very negative for them, that are very distressing. And from a scientific perspective, I mean, from the mainstream medicine perspective, obviously that would be seen as, well, the things that they experience, what quantum matrix science, there's no way that can be real. So they're imagining things. And therefore, so what's said is that, well, we can give them pills to help them not experience those things. And perhaps those pills do help them not experience those things. But at what cost, right? It's essentially nullifying, or it's a bit like, I know people like to laugh at the idea of like toothpaste getting away with your pineal gland or whatever, or like a pineal gland, you know, chlorinated water, but it's that sort of effect, I think, that is probably going on. I know it's a tangent, but tangent's a good thing. I mean, this whole thing I'm doing right now is kind of conducive to tangents, so I hope you like it. Yeah, but it's kind of sad, but at the same time, maybe some people, you know, who are going through a very hard time, they're not coping with that disposition that they have, those talents, the potential that they have to be in touch with the spirit world, right? Maybe it does work for them, at least for a while. It's not for me to say it's wrong for them to take it, but it's not right either. It's just, it's a trade-off. Now, everything's a trade-off, right? Advantages and disadvantages. But there might be a reason, perhaps there are more people born with that predisposition now because of the awakening. Anyway, I'm going to go back to what I was reading. So it's talking about, so that we get secularism, we get nihilism, and darkness, to some extent, eyes not raising to heaven. I mean, yeah, there's a very increasing secularism, people disconnecting to the spiritual side, but also the right brain side, I suppose you could say. Or you could say feminine energy, or you could say, yeah, that sort of thing. The impure will be honored as wise. I mean, sometimes, okay, now I don't know what the truth is about Stephen Hawking and Epstein Island, right? I've heard people claiming, and I saw a picture that supposedly was him on Epstein Island. I don't know for sure about that, but supposing he had been there, I mean, people were looking up to him as very wise, weren't they? And certainly that would be impure. Oh, here's a thought that I've been having about that. And this is a little bit dark. I think people actually underestimate how dark it really is. They assume that all the people there are pedophiles, that there's just loads of pedophiles in the mainstream media. I don't think that's actually accurate. I think what's happening is, with the Cabal, in different levels of it, in these secret societies and stuff, like when people are big and successful, like these celebrities, but they're aspiring to higher levels of success and prominence, they might often, especially if they're ambitious and self-serving, especially if they're narcissists or something like that, or psychopaths, or got those sort of Machiavellian traits, if they're seeking power and prominence, or even if they're scared of what happens if they don't go along with it, I don't know exactly the circumstances, but if they're told, okay, all the people who get prominent, they go to this island or they get involved with this guy, you got to get to know this guy. This guy, Epstein, oh yeah, he's connected and he can help you get successful, right? And if you're told that, and then you're like, you're an up and coming celebrity, but you could be more prominent, or you're not necessarily a celebrity. It could be a media mogul or something. Like, it doesn't matter who you are necessarily. Someone in that position, they might be like, okay, so you didn't want to get to know this guy who's really connected so they can rise up and in prominence, and they're invited to like a special party. They might not know what it's about. They might not know, right? So they go there and they realize that it wasn't what they expected, that there's actually really dark stuff going on there. Now, suppose, now there maybe it's actually, I mean, it might be they're a little bit uncomfortable with it, but they're ambitious, so they'll just grit their teeth and just do what's expected of them. That's the mildest it could be, but it could be that they're psychopaths who don't care about the suffering that they cause, and they might just do it simply because it's expected of them and it's necessary to get what they want. They might not be inclined to actually attracted to that, those sort of things. And keep in mind, a lot of it is torture, just watching torture. Like it's not necessarily sexual for a lot of these people. It's often about power. These people worship power, essentially. They're obsessed with power. So if you think people who are obsessed with power, getting involved, and rape is about power very often, not necessarily just that, but it's often about that. So, man, I can't believe this is kind of low vibe, isn't it? Man, I'm not sure I want to record. Oh, God. Okay, I won't stay on this for too long. What I'm saying is, I suspect that a lot of it is more about ambition and self-serving, self people seeking power and doing it. There's definitely people who are inclined that way who go there, like, of course, right? But you can't assume that they're all that way. And I'm not defending them by saying that they're not pedophiles, because they may all be. I'm saying it's an even worse thing because they're willing to do it while not being inclined that way without giving a fuck, which is actually worse. Or that they're not inclined that way, but they're inclined to do weird, dark magic rituals. I mean, that's worse. That's way worse. Like, it's not merely like that's the light is being shone on this darkness. Now, I could just shy away from mentioning this sort of content, but if you think about it, right, this is a time where the light is shining on the darkness, and really seriously considering this, what's been going on, it can help us understand how the Cabal works, how they think, and how it can be countered, right? So if we shy away from it, we're missing out on, if we shy away from understanding it, we're missing out on opportunity, or maybe an opportunity to, the idea that light workers don't need to strategize I don't agree with that. I don't think we should overthink it, but we can definitely strategize to some extent. And so why would they? There's a system, I imagine, right, where you can get dirt on someone. Now, if they have to get the connections, to get the success that they aspire to, they're power hungry, they require getting dirt on them. So people with dirt on them are easier to control, right? You can blackmail them. And that the higher echelons will, of course, use that to hierarchically control things. It makes sense in a ruthless, nasty kind of way. And I don't think this is new. I think we're just discovering it. And it's probably the case that Epstein happened to be just very good at it. And that's why he was so successful at that. But there are probably people doing that sort of thing already before he came about. So, yeah. But now is a time where this is coming to an end. And, okay. I feel like it's about time to move on to something else. Okay. Oh, geez. All right.
definitely want to focus more on positive stuff. Raise vibes after that, because geez, fuck. Okay, the madman will be believed brave. The wicked esteems as good. I mean, like, that, this is coming to change. This is how it has been. Especially, this is what's changing now. Like, already, some people have been locked up, kids have been freed, things are getting better. Because they're also getting worse. You know, it's that point where we're at the darkest before the dawn, but there's a little bit of hints of dawn, but like there's also more intense dark at the same time. So, or maybe it's like, because there's this hint of pre-dawn, there's a little bit more light, and so the shadows that are there look even more intense. I don't know, I'm not sure, but yeah. So knowledge of the immortal soul will be laughed at and denied. I mean, what do you think's happening? I mean, you know what it's like when you try talking to people about this, regular people, and that if they're not ready for it, they might just laugh at you, right? No reverent words worthy of heaven will be heard or believed. So that's, it seems like, well, it predicted how it would go, right? But it predicted what would happen to Egypt, which is interesting. Of course, if you don't buy that this is legit and real, this Hermes Trismegistus stuff, then, or Thrice-Great Hermes, then obviously you would be like, well, this was written. If you thought this was written recently, using hindsight and just pretending to be from then, I mean, I understand that, but to me, it seems like it's predictive of what was going to happen. But now is the time where we can find this wisdom. I mean, think of how great it is, right? We must be awakening if stuff like this is available. Hermeticism was suppressed for so long, except for the it's esoteric knowledge for a long time. It's no longer esoteric because it's out there, it's published. How is it even, it's just great, amazing that it's even got to be published, right? Things have been changing for a while. Like this awakening, it might seem like it's just very recent, since 2012, but the truth is things have been moving in that direction for a while. And just think how we had all this, we have been given relatively more freedoms in the 20th century. Now, this doesn't mean that it's been all fine and dandy. In certain ways, things have got worse. But the fact that we had the freedoms and rights that we did, even if to some extent it was an illusion, it shows that, yeah, it's a sign of things are moving towards awakening at the very least, right? Okay, so new book, new thing, and I'm not going to go into the darkness so much because low vibes, right? Unless we can keep high vibes about it. But, okay. All right, I have another one. This is the Synchronicity Key by David Wilcock. The hidden intelligence guiding the universe in you. And again, picked with intuitively, blindly. For 2013, first published 2014 in Great Britain by Souvenir Press. Yeah, I think that's enough information. I doubt he'll sue me. Okay.
Okay. All right, so this is page 166. Dr. Michael Newton builds a model of the afterlife. In time, Dr. Michael Newton may be seen as one of the most influential researchers of the 20th century. Dr. Newton began working as a hypnotist in 1947, when he was only 15 years old. Dr. Newton became a specialist in treating various psychological disorders through hypnotic suggestion, a technique used to help change behavioral patterns that were not in the client's best interest for common goals, such as losing weight or stopping smoking. Occasionally, Dr. Newton's clients asked him if he could bring them back to a past life, but he always refused. He was an ardent skeptic and did not believe in reincarnation or the afterlife. However, Dr. Newton's perspective began to change while he worked with a young man who had experienced chronic pain on his right side throughout his entire life. Under hypnosis, the man was directed to make the pain worse. This is a common technique that helps a client learn to manage and control his overall pain levels. This client consistently used the image of being stabbed as he performed this exercise. Dr. Newton probed for the origin of this stabbing symbolism, and the man told him without hesitation that he had been killed by a bayonet in France in a previous life during World War I. The detail was intriguing, and Dr. Newton's own client encouraged him to pursue this direction with him further. Quote, "Initially, I was concerned that a subject's integration of current needs, beliefs, and fears would create fantasies of recollection. However, I didn't take long before I realized our deep-seated memories offer a set of past experiences which are too real and connected to be ignored." Newton explains that people under hypnosis are not dreaming or hallucinating, and in this state they are not capable of lying. They report whatever they see and hear in their subconscious minds as if everything is a literal observation. While under hypnosis, it is possible for them to misinterpret something they are seeing, but they will never report on anything that they do not feel to be the literal truth. I learned the value, quote, "I learned the value of careful cross-examination early in my work, and I found no evidence of anyone faking their spiritual experiences to please me. In fact, subjects in hypnosis are not hesitant in correcting my interpretations of their statements. As my case files grew, I discovered by trial and error the phrase questions about the spirit world in a proper sequence. I also found that it did not matter if a person was an atheist, deeply religious, or believed in any philosophical persuasion in between. Once they were in the proper superconscious state of hypnosis, all were consistent in their reports. I built up a high volume of cases. While these years of specialized research into the spirit world rolled on, I worked practically in seclusion. I even stayed out of metaphysical bookstores because I wanted absolute freedom from outside bias." One of Dr. Newton's interesting observations was that when people are brought into the superconscious state, they do not want to reveal much detail about their experiences in the afterlife. They tend to be evasive, as if they were following a code of ethics telling them what we, in the living world, are supposed to have, only limited access to their knowledge. Dr. Newton gradually learned the pattern of experiences everyone went through, and developing a familiarity with their world, he was able to speak on their terms. This allowed his clients to trust him enough that they would feel comfortable in sharing what they knew. Dr. Newton became quite surprised to discover that there was incredible consistency in these reports. In fact, clients who never met each other in waking life often used the same words, colloquial sayings, graphical descriptions, and expressions for things they encountered in the afterlife. This, coupled with the fact that everyone went through the same stages of events in the same order, suggested that we know the afterlife very well once we are hypnotized into the subconscious, superconscious state. Interestingly, Dr. Newton discovered that no one client was able to take him through all of the stages he had identified. The client seemed to jump into a certain stage of the process and stay there or progress forward through a few others.
Dr. Newton's complete overview of the journey through the afterlife had to be built up by interviewing many different clients. A great deal of clinical experience and research spanning many years went into his overall model. Newton's first book, Journey of Souls, guides us through 10 distinct stages from initial death to final reincarnation, death and departure, gateway to the spirit world, homecoming, orientation, transition, placement, life selection, choosing a new body, preparation and embarkation, and rebirth. Life selection and choosing a new body are technically two halves of the same stage in Dr. Newton's model and occur in the same relative location in the afterlife. But the experiences are different enough that a separate chapter is dedicated to each of them. The overall body of information Dr. Newton has provided is both highly fascinating and essential to understanding the greater reality we live in. So we will now review each of these stages and experiences we will all encounter along the way. All right, by the way, if you're interested in any of these books I read out from, if you're interested in me reading more of them, well, feel free to comment. The best, or most likely to see it if you comment in the Facebook group that's linked on the anchor.fm website. Also, this is me subtly encouraging you to go to the Facebook group. Yeah. I might have other accounts, social media accounts like Instagram and stuff, but I haven't got to that point yet. Anyway, so there are these different stages here. Let me wonder, will I continue or stop? Yes. Oh, continue came before stop. So, okay, I'm going to carry on. Hope you enjoy. Stage 1, death and departure. You find yourself floating over your body. You see people around your body who are grieving your death. Oh, right. You find yourself trying to convince them without success that you're still there, only in another form. Soon you feel a pulling sensation that draws you away from your body. There is an ecstatic feeling of freedom and brilliant light. Some people see the light all around them, while others see it in the distance and feel pulled towards it. This is what creates the commonly reported effect of moving through a dark tunnel with a light at its end. Some people are not interested in staying near their bodies after their physical death. They feel the strong pull of the afterlife and do not want to wait around to experience it. Many others will stay around the earth for a few days of our time, until shortly after their funerals. Dr. Newton's participants have revealed that they have a greatly accelerated sense of time in the afterlife. And what we think of as days will only take minutes to pass by for them. Most people are not interested in seeing themselves buried, as they do not experience emotions like we do, but they do appreciate the respect and tributes that their friends pay them. At this stage, people may also report specific factual details of who they were and where they lived. Dr. Newton says that the average person has an astonishing ability to reveal dates and geographical locations of past lives, which often can be verified. Even though the borders of nations and names of places change over time, the specific details have consistently proven to be correct. This mirrors the results that Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker obtained in their own exhaustive reincarnation research, as well as the research in the case readings. Stage 2, gateway to the spirit world. The second phase Dr. Newton catalogued, the gateway to the spirit world, is where we see the dark tunnel, enter it, and reach the light at the end. Not everyone experiences this sequence of events the same way. Some see the tunnel appear right over their bodies, while others have to fly high above the earth before they can enter it. But in most cases, the tunnel appears quickly after we leave the earth. Only the most disturbed spirits will attempt to stay near their bodies for any length of time. Younger souls with fewer past lives may take a little longer to head out than more experienced souls who tend to move on quickly. The common stereotype in which a person ends up in a flowing field of tall grass or wildflowers as soon as he leaves the tunnel with his or her relatives, friends and relatives there, did happen in some cases, but was by no means the standard. However, everyone seemed to experience a spectacular, inspiring set of visions at this point. Most people are somewhat confused when they first emerge and are not sure how to interpret the forms, colors, and energies they are seeing. It will often take you time to understand and explain what you are seeing in any tangible manner to the hypnotist. Almost immediately after their death, most people do hear beautiful music or sound vibrations, which continue to be audible as they move through the early stages of their entry into the afterlife. Others report seeing layers of energy in which different activities seem to be happening. Case 5 in Dr. Newton's book is a man who reported seeing an absolutely gigantic even, and incredibly beautiful vision as soon as he came out of the tunnel. He witnessed a staggeringly large ice palace made of gorgeous crystals. He said most of the crystals were greyish or white, but that he saw colours in glittering mosaics. He could see no end to this gorgeous city. As he kept looking, it seemed to stretch on forever. The sheer size, scope, and grandeur of what he was seeing didn't even seem possible. Although each of us may have a completely different vision, whatever we see is invariably a majestic sight. We may see stunning castle towers in the distance, beautiful rainbows in a vast blue sky, or colourful fields. Interestingly, these scenes seem to be consistent over the course of many lifetimes for a soul. Dr. Newton has observed that these scenes often relate to our beloved memories from our physical lives, such as an unforgotten home, school, garden, mountain, or seashore, in order to help us feel familiar and comfortable when we arrive in the spirit world. This is the only part of our journey that has so much variety. After we move through this stage, our observations become much more standardized. We also find out at this point in the book that we do not immediately become omniscient after death. We may still be confused, sad, bewildered, and traumatized by what has happened. If we experience sadness and confusion at this point, we are generally approached by a main guide in the afterlife. This is a very loving and supportive person who then helps us move through the initial greeting and orientation. Our guide helps us work through whatever emotions we are feeling with patience and expertise. Younger souls are more apt to be greeted this way, whereas more experienced souls will remember where they are and know where they are going. Even in cases where people are still experiencing trauma, they are quite fascinated by the beauty and majesty of what they see around them. Stage 3, Homecoming. Stage 3 in Dr. Newton's mapping of the afterlife is called Homecoming. This is where we are most formally greeted into the spirit world, not just by our initial guide, but by others who are close to us. These people often appear as masses of luminous energy, but can project faces we are familiar with in order to help us ease us into our new surroundings. The face of a former lifetime is only one of the theoretical limitless number of different forms a soul can take on the afterlife, since our energetic bodies are completely thought responsive. Right. Another very interesting thing Dr. Newton discovered in his research, which is more fully explained in his second volume, Destiny of Souls, is that we will see people we know who are still alive on Earth as well. Even if their physical bodies are alive, they will have an energetic body that remains in the afterlife the entire time. This is quite different from most people's view of reincarnation. Again and again, Dr. Newton's clients revealed that we project only a certain percentage of our total essence into the human form at any one time. The rest remains in the afterlife to guide and watch over what we are doing. This is explained in Dr. Newton's second book, Destiny of Souls, in the section entitled Soul Division and Reunification. The average less advanced soul will put between 50 to 70% of its energy into a physical body, whereas more advanced souls will never transfer more than 25%. Dr. Newton explains that the volume of energy we put in is less important than the overall quality and refinement of the wisdom and experience of the soul. And therefore, more mature souls do better by using less of their energy, as it leaves them with more flexibility in the afterlife. Some highly ambitious souls also divide themselves into 2 or 3 or even 3 simultaneous physical incarnations on Earth in the hope of dramatically speeding up their evolution, and only leave 10% of their soul's energy behind in the afterlife. Once you commit to a path like this, you have to carry through with it for the entire length of time your bodies or bodies are alive on the physical planet. Dr. Newton discovered that most souls quickly see the folly in this path and are warned not to do it by their guides, and will not attempt to do it more than once or twice before deciding it is not a good idea. This, of course, also means that overlaps in which a soul will project itself into a new body well before an existing incarnation has faded out can and do occur. This upsets most people's idea of their linear one-to-one schedule of reincarnation, if they've ever taken the time to think about these concepts. We also find that if a soul were to project 100% of its energy into a body, it would literally fry the electrochemical circuits of the brain. Furthermore, the brain would be totally subjugated to the power of the soul, and this would eliminate the veering referred to in the Law of One series as a necessary aspect of our evolution. Without spiritual amnesia, we would not have the potential to grow. We would come into our physical incarnation on Earth already knowing everything. Therefore, if you invariably see people you know and love the most when you go through the homecoming phase, even if they are still alive on Earth, there is a lot of hugging and crying and an incredible feeling of love, acceptance, and belonging at this stage. Honestly, I just got a sort of heartwarming feeling just reading that. This has a tremendously positive effect on us and greatly eases our passage into the new world. Also, at this point, we begin very clearly remembering multiple lifetimes we have shared with each of these people. All of our lifetimes start to blend together as we realize how many different lifetimes we've incarnated and interacted with the same folks. However, if we have committed atrocities towards others, such as murders, or toward ourselves, such as suicide, we may go off to be alone with our guide and rehabilitate and quickly plan out our next incarnation. This is all described in The Journey of Souls, Chapter 4, The Displaced Soul. People who go through this process are always treated with patience and love, not the fiery world of torment and purgatory in which most people have been taught to believe. However, they do end up reviewing and reliving the ways in which they hurt others and experience it from the other side, such as direct reliving of how they made others people feel by their actions. The Law of One series clearly reveals that suicide is a very bad idea. It creates a need for a great deal of healing work and a renewed dedication to go through the same lessons again in a subsequent lifetime, hopefully without committing suicide the next time. Violent, unethical acts require us to choose different life events that we hope will balance out our karma if we handle them lovingly. If we do come into the afterlife with this kind of significant damage, we can spend quite an extended amount of time in isolation before getting the opportunity to again mix with our friends and loved ones. Furthermore, once we are allowed back into our group, we are then closely supervised. In case 10, one of Dr. Newton's clients reported on a man who had terribly hurt a girl during his most recent life and as a result did not connect with his soul group. He had to go through extensive private study with his guide and quickly chose to reincarnate as a woman who was physically abused and treated with cruelty. This helped him appreciate and understand what it feels like to go through these experiences so that he would be less inclined to hurt others in subsequent lifetimes. This man was not judged by his guide. In the afterlife, we are well aware of what our goals are in the physical plane. If we see that we have not learned the lessons we chose, we will cooperate with our guides to determine how we may best be restored to balance. The people we meet at the homecoming stage may not interact with us further, except at a distance. Once we move into the later stages, we are reacquainted with our soul group, a team of people sharing a similar level of spiritual development with us. Also, as we become more advanced as souls, no welcoming committee is necessary at the homecoming stage. and we will quickly move on to rejoin our soul group. In these cases, we seem to be pulled quite naturally along wave-like bands of light. At this point, Dr. Newton also reveals that even though there is full thought sharing in the afterlife and telepathic communication occurs among everyone, it is still possible for two individuals to have a private conversation by touching each other. Most of Dr. Newton's clients are unwilling to divulge any details about the contents of these intimate discussions. All right, stage 4, orientation. Once we go through the homecoming process, we go through an interesting series of experiences to help us reorient and refamiliarize ourselves with the afterlife. Our guide is often intimately involved with us at this stage. The first and most important part of this process is an energetic form of healing in which the traumas we carried in our physical lives are washed away. Pardon me. Dr. Newton thinks of this as akin to a hospital stay, and his clients consistently use similar words and phrases to describe it. The most common phrase is the place of healing, but it might also be called the chamber, a berth, or a stopover zone. Once we reach this hospital-like chamber, we go through what Dr. Newton calls the shower of healing. Our guide often directs the process. We move into a specific room of light and are bathed in a stream of liquid healing energy that appears like a beam coming towards us and moving through us. Many of Dr. Newton's clients reported that the sensation is similar to a refreshing shower after a hard day's work, but in this case, the effect is much deeper. New souls in particular come to Earth in a very positive, loving state of mind and expect to be treated fairly. We are shocked as we realize how cruel and hurtful people can really be. Negative traumatic memories, fears, and worries are washed away at this point. We again feel whole. We are inspired, renewed, and restored, and are finally able to let go of the emotional bonds of our previous lifetime. The second phase of orientation is a substantial counseling process with our guide. The guide asks us probing questions about how we lived our lives and whether we lived up to our own expectations as we had chosen them before birth. This process is done with gentle grace, not a harsh, accusing tone or demeanor, but we are still expected to be honest, soul-searching, and thorough. Our guide already knows our strengths and weaknesses, our fears and fixations, and is willing to work with us as long as we keep trying. It is impossible for us to hide anything from our guides due to the inevitable reality of instant telepathy in the afterlife. This counseling process often seems to occur in a particular room, and the room may have similarities to places we know from our own lives on Earth. Some people have a much more difficult time with this counseling than others, and this is due to the overall maturity of the soul. Great humility is required, and we still experience our waking personality to varying degrees. We are not exalted beings who have reached a state of total soul perfection. We have wants, needs, and desires. We may feel embarrassed, awkward, fearful, and disappointed. Therefore, this process is certainly not easy, but it is often necessary. We also discovered that many different ways in which our guide attempted to influence us telepathically to make positive choices in our lives, just as through synchronicity. In order to progress, we must honestly admit how we disregarded those messages and chose to act in weakness, ignorance, and fear instead. This whole process is a private warm-up for a much more significant meeting that happens later on, when we meet a highly evolved group that many people refer to as the Council of Masters or Council of Elders at the end of stage 5. The more important souls, that's not a thing. The more advanced souls do not require any counseling at the orientation stage and simply move on to their ultimate destination. All right, so stage 5, transition. Once we are bathed in healing light, we have been open and honest enough to move through our initial state counseling session with our guide. We go through what Dr. Newton calls a transition phase. The visions we experience here can be some of the most breathtaking of our entire journey through the afterlife. We move into an enormous area where we see souls coming and going, much like a train or subway station, but on an utterly vast scale. Gravity does not apply in the afterlife, so there will often be a vast interconnecting web of energetic tunnels leading souls to their eventual destinations. One of Dr. Newton's clients referred to this area as a hub of a great wagon wheel. And once you reach the home of your destination, you move out of the wheel and begin traveling down one of the spokes. People are typically very excited by what they see at this stage and find themselves traveling along lines of light. There was no darkness here. Everything is glowing with light at different levels of brightness. We are usually well aware by this point that once we are moving through this tunnel to our eventual destination, we will be really acquainted with those we love the most. As we think about these people, we telepathically connect with them and experience an initial meeting in that form before we actually leave the tunnel. These people are at the same relative level of soul evolution as we are, and we learn from one another experiences and compare notes in the afterlife, often with a great deal of humor. That sounds really nice. We do not have much control over our movement at this stage. The tunnels naturally bend as we go along, and Dr. Newton's more advanced clients reveal that higher entities are responsible for guiding the movement. These entities are called the directors, or another similar term. As we travel along through the tunnels, we see plenty of destinations where other people have gathered. These areas appear as clumps or clusters of light, almost like buds that have grown off the stem we are traveling through, much like a flowering or fruiting plant. However, once we arrive at our own destination and enter it, the scenery often becomes much more conventional looking. From a standpoint of our experiences on Earth, we will often see large areas that are familiar to us, including towns, schools, beloved homes, and landmarks that help us feel safe and secure. We are now fully reacquainted with our soul group, people with whom we keep reincarnating again and again, as they play different roles. They may appear as parents, romantic partners, siblings, teachers, co-workers, or friends in various lifetimes. Members of our soul group who are incarnate in human forms on Earth may seem to be half asleep, radiating a dimmer light and staying fairly quiet. They may greet us briefly but tend to keep to themselves. Most of us at this stage are immediately aware of who is in a body and who is between lifetimes. Once we have taken the same time to reconnect with our friends and loved ones and enjoy these familiar surroundings, we are ready to meet the Council of Elders. Dr. Newton's second book, The Destiny of Souls, goes into much more detail about this group counseling session that occurs at the end of stage 5. The process is similar to the initial counseling we went through with our guide. Only now we are accountable to a group of highly evolved beings. You know, I feel like my soul group know I'm reading this right now. Of course they do. All right, that is quite an interesting feeling. Anyway, stage 6, placement. Once we've completed the group counseling at the end of the transition stage, we move into placement. This is where we are reacquainted with familiar groups of various sizes. At this stage, we experience a return to a school-type environment. The classrooms can be quite beautiful and will have scenery chosen from our favorite places on Earth. Apparently, many Westerners choose a Greek temple as the main location. We study our own soul group, our closest friends, who enjoy a level of evolution similar to ours. This group can range between 3 and 25 souls, but the typical number is about 15. This group will often be called the inner circle, and it stays consistent from lifetime to lifetime. We also come into some degree of contact with much larger secondary group of souls who incarnate with us to varying degrees. Dr. Newton says that these secondary groups are never seen and have less than 1,000 souls that can often be significantly larger than that. When we combine this observation with what we find in the case readings, we see that entire towns, cities, nations, or ethnic groups can be seen moving in clusters through different locations and eras. And as we are about to explore in part 3, these eras are organized into cycles of historical events that repeat very precisely until we finally learn our lessons and are no longer need to continue occurring. So this is a very clear example, in my opinion, of as below, so above, as above, so below, and similar Hermetic principles or teachings. And yeah, that's pretty interesting. So I haven't actually been given much commentary on this because honestly, I don't know what to add to it. It's so good, right? Like it resonates. It makes sense. I'm happy I chose to keep reading. Maybe my soul group are too, huh? Well, this is certainly higher vibe, isn't it? I think I'll keep the early part of what I said. I feel like the contrast is... Also, I don't really feel like it's a problem, even though it's dark, because I felt like it was dealt with... Well, I felt like I dealt with it in a mature way. I'm not sure, but yeah. Wait, where was I? Yeah, so that was the end of the page. Now, okay, yeah, I'll finish this section. We perform real work in this school setting, which usually comes in the form of sitting down with what Dr. Newton's clients usually call the life book. Although this first appears to look like a typical large bound leather book, it acts much more like an advanced holographic projection technology once we open it. Each page of this book represents a given period of time in our lives. As we go through the book, we review all the different experiences we went through in our lives in vivid, realistic detail. This process is much like virtual reality in the sense that we often end up directly projecting into scenes we are reviewing. Special emphasis is placed on projecting into the minds and hearts of those we interacted with, especially if we cause them to feel hurt or pain in some way. Now we get to personally experience everything we put them through, including the most painful events. The Law of One series reveals that this process can be significantly shortened if we remember events where we hurt others while we are still living in a physical body and forgive ourselves for what we did. Not all of the placement stage involves the difficult work of reviewing our lives and forgiving ourselves for what we have done to hurt others. There are also periods of recreation where souls on different levels of evolution gather together for enjoyable activities. This may include forming circles with each other to unify our thoughts and feelings more fully and to project energy. Such interactions with others may involve singing or the energetic equivalent of it. We also interact with our guides who are on a higher level of evolution, and we feel a great sense of community. So, oh, there's more. I mean, this is great. I mean, there's stuff about, the next section is, I'm going to put a bookmark in here so I can come back to this, because this is a particularly special sound effects in the background, hey? All right, so I'm going to keep that page because if people are interested, I will continue reading this chapter because it's got information about the afterlife, and honestly, it makes a good episode. I mean, I could actually separate the two parts of what I recorded here, but I don't think I will. Right. Pardon me about that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on doing a reading about mapping out of the afterlife in a different episode. I don't know when, but I'm going to do that because, actually, when does this chapter start? Oh no, this chapter does start before when I was talking about you know, Dr. Newton, but I honestly think I thought the most appropriate place to start is where I started. That's why it was chosen for me. Yeah, so the next section involves the 7 different levels, which is an interesting number to come up. Wanderers and more. So yeah, this is great. So, well, maybe I will continue. Huh? How much further does this go? Whew. I'm liking this book. I might do more readings from this for sure, because wow, okay. So I'm going to leave it at this for now. I hope you enjoyed it. Even the earlier bit might be eye-opening, might not. I don't know. All right. Have a nice day, and keep shining brightly, eh?